So hitchhiking is frowned upon, from what I understand. Whether you're the person trying to solicit a ride, or you're driving and you see somebody, or an iced coffee on the side of the road. Not an iced coffee. I've been thinking about iced coffee a lot because I switched to decaf, and it's not bad. Whatever. The point is, we have Uber and Lyft and all these things, so it's like that's just professional streamlined hitchhiking, right? No? Steve Wenner here from GetRubix.com, and I'm very excited because today we are going to take our first look at Windows Autopilot Device Preparation, or Autopilot V2, or whatever you want to call it, right? Doesn't matter. It's here. Well, not 100%, but we'll talk about that. And we're going to break it down. We're going to look at it, what it does, how to set it up, some of the weirdness, some of the nuance, and, everything. And this is just going to be a first. We're going to do a lot with this, right? So buckle up. Granted, if you're on the side of the road, you don't have an app, so you don't know if the person is working for somebody or not, and you're just supposed to get in or not get in the car, or I don't know. I'm also doing oat milk now, too, with the decaf.
Get Rubix, solving for the modern workplace.
All right, so we're going to bounce around a little bit. I want to start with the end user experience. I was going to say this is a Windows 11 PC that's been registered in... It's not registered. That's change number 1. Actually, why don't we talk about the changes first? So I'm going to hop over to this whiteboard. Let's look at the relationship for the V1 of Autopilot, first of all. Autopilot, Azure, and Intune, right? So if we were to take a PC, and let's see if I can find a laptop image. There we go. That's going to be good enough for us. So if I have a laptop, I don't like the word laptop. All right. So original Autopilot started with a registration, right? And the registration consisted of, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit, make this a little more, there we go. The registration consisted of what? That was the hardware hash, or the OEM info through the API with the reseller, right? So if, a registered reseller or the OEM themselves can take the manufacturer, the model number, the serial number, and pass that through to the Autopilot service for registration. So that had to be done. And at that point, what happens here is a device object is created. Device object created in Azure, or now Entra, but that's what that would do. Okay, at that point, you have that device object, so that's what you would assign all your Autopilot stuff to, your profile, your apps, things like that. So what would happen is our device would end up in an Azure group, and Intune would then push what? The Autopilot profile, apps, policy, scripts, all that good stuff, right? Because the device is registered. And the whole point here is that at this point, let's get a user in here. When the PC is sent to the end user and they power it on for the first time, it already exists in this group, right? So even if they sign in, Intune already knows what components to apply to it, the apps, the policy, the scripts, because it already exists. It's the post sign in that actually applies the user configurations. That's always why we skipped the user ESP, right? Because it didn't matter. We were just waiting for device stuff. A big thing with Autopilot V2 or device prep is that this is user based. So I'm going through this out of the box experience just as an out of the box experience. This is a Windows 11 Pro device. So we're going to experience everything you would if you bought this at a Best Buy, or if this was your gaming computer. Okay, so you can already see the differences here. I'm seeing the end user, the license agreement. This device is not managed by anything yet. I can name the PC if I want to. I'm going to hit skip, but again, this is something that's going to be within your user's control here. And after connecting to the network, I'm hardwired in this instance, but I'm going to be asked to sign in with I could do a work or school account. I can also do a personal account. So this is a little bit of a problem because now I have a choice that my user has to make. All right, so far, and I'm just showing you the front end of it, and we'll get to the why in a second, but this is the out-of-the-box experience, and I don't believe it's ideal. I've already presented the user with too many choices. So that would be the first thing that concerns me. Kind of the benefit of Autopilot was to streamline things for the enterprise. Give a device to an end user, they see the company logo, and we kind of handhold them through, you have to sign in here. There's a lot of choices. So far, I gotta say this part's a negative for me. There are ways to mitigate it, and we will talk about that. So I'm gonna play along. I'm gonna go set up for work or school, and this will give me the opportunity to sign in with the end user account. Now, I am not in my normal tenant, but we still got Rick Jones. So we're gonna use Rick Jones. M365X 796. Oh yeah, it's one of those tenants. Basically, this Autopilot V2 has not rolled out across the board yet. So we're still waiting for that, but I was able to spin up a temporary tenant in the meantime. Now that I've signed in, okay, I'm going to be prompted with MFA. Let me hit that actually. I could exclude that if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it there. That's part of my sign in this tenant. All right, so as soon as we're done with the MFA challenge, now is where, because the user is signed in, right, it should be able to start the autopilot process, because the autopilot process here is assigned to a user group. So this is very different. So until now in the process, the device knows nothing about, autopilot happening and things like that. So we'll watch this play out. Okay, so you can see now I have a very different looking, what I would call an enrollment status page. It's telling me the device is being set up, but it's also telling me what's happened in one thing at a time. I can appreciate this because the standard enrollment status page looks somewhat convoluted to an end user, and it doesn't really, I think, give them the experience they're used to when they're, say, provisioning their own smartphone. So right here, and we'll watch some of the rest of it, we won't have to stare at the whole thing, but I think it gives us a much better experience, and the user is a little more comfortable seeing what's coming down. So this is a better experience. All right, so you can see we moved on to installing required apps and policies for your organization. Okay, so that's a lot better. So while we're waiting for this, let me show you what the setup looks like, because this could be some time. All right, so when I go to devices enrollment, we're going to see this immediately between enrollment options and our OG autopilot, device preparation, which is really what it is. So let's click on it and kind of get the whole rundown of what it is. So I'm going to make a new profile to show you what I did to make the original one. So first thing you do is you name your profile. So I'm going to call this the YouTube profile. Device group. Now, I already said this was targeted at a user group. So what the heck is device group doing? Well, device group is the group that Autopilot will put the device into. Think about what we were using group tags for in dynamic device groups. Autopilot would upload the device with a tag. We would see that tag and based on the dynamic group, throw it in there. Well, the way device preparation works is part of the profile is saying, hey, this device is now an Autopilot device, so you got to go over here now to this group, and we'll talk about that. So I have to assign my group, but it can't just be any group. It has to be a special group that we're just going to use for Autopilot. So in my case, I used a group called Autopilot V2 device group. So very easy. Configuration settings. This is where the actual meat is. There's 4 categories: deployment settings, out-of-box experience, apps, and scripts. So deployment settings, right now, at least at the time of filming this and in the immediate future, you don't have many options here. Single user for deployment mode. There's no self-deploy. There's nothing for multi-user or kiosks yet. It's only user-driven. There's no pre-provisioning, and join type is only cloud. Finally, cloud native, ladies and gentlemen. Although it does say Azure AD join, doesn't it? Can we make up our mind what we're calling the thing? Now, user account, I still get to choose between standard and administrator, so I'm going to leave that on standard. Your out-of-the-box settings are way more streamlined, and this I do like. So basically, how many minutes before it times out, which let's check on it, by the way. It's still provisioning. We're on 17%, not bad. I'm allowing it 30 minutes, so actually better provision those 30 minutes. So I'm not pushing a lot. You can customize your support message just like before. Allow the user to skip setup after multiple attempts. I think that's good. I would like to know what multiple attempts constitutes. Is it 2? Is it 6? So, you know, definitely something I'd like to see more details on. Show link to diagnostics. So I'm gonna, well, hopefully my enrollment will go through. If not, we'll get to see the diagnostics, but I am going to purposely try to install something that I know will fail, just so we can get a better look at that in a future video, because there are much better diagnostics right there on that screen, and hopefully make the admin's life a little bit easier. Now, apps is very close to what we did before. Which apps do we want to assign to that group, and we want the track the installation status of. So I have 2 that I've done here. I've done Autopilot branding and Microsoft 365 apps, so Office. I kept it simple. Again, it's a new tenant, so I didn't have my usual stuff. You can also do the same with PowerShell scripts. I think this is really an important piece here. The reason being is PowerShell scripts were always installed very early in the process of Autopilot, and depending what you have assigned to your broad devices, this might screw some things up. You might have some scripts you don't want to run at this point. You want to wait until the user's at the desktop, and you might have some that are very critical. So this is nice to be able to tell it what scripts we want to run here. Now, I don't have any scripts set in this tenant. That's something we're going to get to in a future video, but after this, we are just assigning this to a user group. So I made a user group for Autopilot V2, and that's got, it'll tell us it's got 1 user in it, Rick Jones, but that's how that works. And then we hit next, and that's the end of it. So let's back this up and kind of look at it high level, but not before we check in on our device. 24% completed. We can do a little whiteboarding before then, I think. So if this was the OG Autopilot, what's changed here? Well, right off the bat, there technically is no Autopilot component here. There's not like a separate registration service that we have to send the hash to first. So the PC powers on, and only when signing in through work or school is when the process kicks off. All right, so let's see what we have so far. We have the PC powers on and connects to the network. And when the user signs in with their work or school account, they're part of that Autopilot user group. So you can see, because the user is in that Autopilot user group, Intune knows to push the Autopilot profile down to the device. But that doesn't mean it's going to push everything to it, just the profile. So what the profile will then do, so the profile will force the device into the Autopilot device group. Now that group is the one that gets the apps, policy, and scripts. So it's not as linear as the old method. It's a little roundabout, and it's very, very user-centric. I'll meet you over at the end of the provisioning. Okay, and now we're at the required setup is complete, and we're going to keep moving forward here. So again, very clear instructions. I'm stuck on the choose privacy settings for your device. So again, more things I want to obfuscate for my end user that I don't want them to having to mess with these maybe. Okay, so, oh, I think I forgot my wallpaper, but either way, we have my start menu stuff, like my taskbar and all that stuff looks like it applied. Shifted the taskbar to the left. I have my start menu layout. So all good there. Am I an administrator? Let's see here. Let's try to open something. Command, run as administrator. I'm not an administrator, so that's good. So yeah, we're all set up. Before we wrap up and I rant a little bit more, let's talk about some important things during the setup that I glossed over. Okay, so one important part of the process is being joined to the device group. Now, this is not just a normal device group. This is a little bit of a special group here, and I want to talk about what that means. So, what I had to do is, I'll show you the group here. Autopilot V2 device group. It has to be an assigned security group. This cannot be a dynamic device group at the moment. So this group gets members. You don't add devices manually to it. It gets its members added from a new service principal called, I think it has many names, but I'll show you. If I go to owners, it's called the Intune provisioning client. Now, this is very important because this is not in every tenant yet. So when you go to make the group and you go to add the owners and you search for Intune, you might not see it. Yeah, so it wasn't here before. I had to add that manually. So let's make this group in my original tenant, the Rubik's Dev one. This doesn't have Autopilot V2 yet, but that's okay. We could still get ready. So I kind of want to walk you through the steps I took. So I'm going to make sure it's a security group. We're going to call it Autopilot. I'm going to call it V2 device group. It's assigned, no owners. We need an owner. So I'm going to search for Intune. Now, there's a lot of Intune stuff in my tenant, but there's no provisioning client. Now, it can have different names. So what's actually interesting is, in this case, I actually have it. This is the ID. I'll put it in the below, the comments below, the area. Intune Autopilot Confidential Client. That is another name for it. It's this ID though. The name doesn't matter. So if for some reason you don't have this in your tenant, we would follow some very simple instructions. So we would do, that might not be, let's run this as administrator. Okay, so for some reason you don't see that there, you have to add it manually. And that can be added manually very easily. You have to first install, oh, I'm typing wrong. So you have to install the module called Azure AD. It's already installed. Great. Now we're going to connect Azure AD. And I would recommend using Global Admin for this. You are making a new service principal, so you're probably going to need that. We are connected. Now we just do new Azure AD service principal, the app ID, and you can use, it'll be this one. I'll leave, again, this will be below. You could just add this. That's the app ID. So if it's not already there, you have to you hit enter, and then you'll have the app created, and you'll see it in the tenant. In this tenant, it's called Intune Autopilot Confidential Client. In my other tenant, it happens to be called Intune Provisioning Client. Again, it's the ID that matters, not the name of it. So once that's there, you select that as the owner and you create the group. And that is the group you use when creating the profile for the device group. Calling this a V2, I could see why we don't want to do that. Autopilot Device Preparation, I don't even know if that's the best word, but the fact that it's something different really is a better way to look at it, because this doesn't give us what Autopilot gives us. It gives us definitely a streamlined experience to a certain point for onboarding devices. I think I would put this at something I would be comfortable deploying for more tech-savvy users, right? If I kind of want to help them onboard faster and I trust them to make it that far in the process, I think I would be comfortable with that. I mean, all in all, the device did what it was supposed to do. It ended up enrolled in Intune. It was Entra joined, so this is very much a cloud native experience. But you know, I think there's a lot there from like this enrollment status page. If we could pair that with things in the original Autopilot, or V1 or Autopilot proper, I don't know what we're calling these things yet. But, you know, again, I think there's going to be a lot of benefit there. Look, if I seem wishy-washy or slightly negative, it's because that was a first look, and that's what we have right now. It's a new product. It's going to grow. There's some great write-ups on there. Rudy Ooms' blog that he's doing is going deep into it, so definitely check that out. And, you know, we're going to look at a few more things with this this coming week, so we'll be seeing you.